Welcome to Water Myth Busters channel. The channel exists to make water info simple, accurate, and useful by using evidence, and help people to highlight real-world water challenges. Water problems are a global issue and leaders in both developed and developing countries should focus on them. Recently, India's Union Budget 2026-27 proposes a tax holiday until 2047 to attract global cloud providers and solidify India's status as a digital hub. However, this rapid expansion threatens water security of India.
India has a massive goal to become a global digital superpower, a real hub for the AI era. But here's the catch. This ambition, which is all about data and processing power, has a hidden and absolutely immense thirst, a thirst for water. And this is all happening in a country that's already facing a pretty severe water crisis. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into this collision between digital dreams and physical reality. So here's our roadmap. First, we'll look at India's big digital push. Then, we'll get into the incredible thirst these data centers have. After that, we'll see where this ambition collides with the country's water crisis, explore the real-world risks, and finally check out what a more sustainable path might actually look like. All right, so what's fueling this whole thing? Well, at the very heart of the strategy is this huge economic incentive. We're talking about a proposed tax holiday for foreign cloud companies that would stretch all the way to 2047. The one condition? They have to build and run their operations through Indian data centers. It's a serious long-term bet, and it's designed to bring the absolute giants of the tech world to India. Now, you got to understand, this isn't happening in a vacuum. It is a full-on, fierce global race for computing power. Just to give you an idea, in 2025 alone, global investment in new data centers is set to blow past $270 billion. Building these things, especially the ones needed for AI, takes a staggering amount of money up front. And that's exactly why investors demand decades of policy stability, which is precisely what this long-term tax plan is trying to offer.
The scale of this plan is, well, it's staggering. India's current data center capacity is on track to multiply by 4, maybe even 5 times by the end of this decade alone. We are talking about a massive and incredibly rapid expansion. But all this new digital infrastructure, what does it actually consume to run?
And that gets us right to the physical cost of data. You see, every single byte that gets processed, every AI model that gets trained, it all generates heat, a lot of it. And to manage that heat, you need an incredible amount of 2 key resources: energy and, you guessed it, water. To really get a feel for the scale here, just look at this number: 6 billion gallons. That's about 23 billion liters. That's how much water Google's global data centers used for cooling in just 1 year. It's an absolutely jaw-dropping figure that shows you the hidden thirst of the cloud. Okay, so there's a really key term we need to understand here, and that's consumptive water use. This isn't like water that's just borrowed from a river and then put back. No, this is water that's taken from a local source, a river, a lake, whatever, and it's essentially lost from that system. Most of the time, it just evaporates into the air as part of the cooling process. It's gone for good.
So how does this happen? Well, there are basically 2 main ways data centers stay cool. First, there's evaporative cooling. You pump water through, it soaks up heat from the servers, and then you vent that hot water vapor outside. It works well, but it needs a constant, fresh supply of water. The other method is a closed-loop system. Here, water still absorbs the heat, but instead of getting vented, it runs through big air chillers to cool down and then gets reused. This approach uses way less water, but, and this is the big trade-off, it needs a ton more electricity to power those chillers.
And this is where we get to the absolute core of the problem. This is where India's incredible digital ambition runs headfirst into a really profound, pre-existing national crisis: water scarcity.
The numbers right here tell a story of a fundamental imbalance. India is home to 18% of all the people in the world, but it has access to only 4% of the world's fresh water. And remember, that's the stark reality before a single one of these new data centers even gets built. And the human impact of this is just immense. A report from Niti Aayog found that nearly 600 million people, that's almost half the entire country's population, are already dealing with high to extreme water stress. This is not some future problem on the horizon. It is a full-blown crisis today. And if you look at this data, you can see the trend is just undeniable. Back in 1951, the water available per person was over 5,000 cubic meters. Plenty. But by 2010, it had plummeted, falling below the international line to be officially classified as water stressed. And as you can see, the projections show that decline is only going to continue. So on top of that shrinking supply, here's the direct impact of the tech boom. India's data centers are projected to consume 150 billion liters of water in 2025. And by 2030, that number is expected to more than double. This is a massive new demand being dropped right on top of already strained water systems. So when you have this collision between soaring demand and shrinking supply, you start to see some very real, very tangible risks, not just for the environment, but for society and for the digital infrastructure itself.
And what makes this problem even worse is location. Research by S&P Global found that a staggering 70% of India's data centers are or will be built in areas that are already experiencing high water stress. I mean, they're being built in the precise spots where water is already the most scarce. This creates a direct risk of failure for the kinds of services we all depend on every day. Just imagine, it's a peak summer month, there's a drought, and there's simply not enough water to cool a data center. That could lead to shutdowns, and that could disrupt everything from banking networks to hospital cloud systems to transportation. The reliability of our digital lives is, in a very real way, tied to the availability of water.
And as you might expect, this is not going unnoticed on the ground. Local opposition is definitely growing. In places like Visakhapatnam, where a huge data center is planned, you have civil society groups raising the alarm. They're asking a pretty simple question: why are public funds being used to support an industry that could make the serious water shortages they already face even worse?
So, with these immense challenges, what's the path forward? Is there one? Well, the focus is starting to shift from just building more to figuring out how to build smarter and much more sustainably.
Right now, India has regulations for data centers that cover things like land use and energy efficiency. But there's one crucial element that's almost completely missing. Any ideas? Yep, it's dedicated water management. And that's widely seen as a major policy gap.
So, closing that gap could involve a few key solutions. You could have policies that mandate data centers use non-potable or reclaimed wastewater for cooling, so they're not competing with people for fresh drinking water. You could strategically direct new projects to river basins that are less water-stressed. There could be stronger incentives to push companies to adopt these minimal water cooling technologies. And finally, to deal with the energy side of that trade-off, you could require that all this growing electricity demand has to be met with renewable energy.
And all of this brings us to a final, really profound thought. As India charges into its digital future, it's facing a fundamental choice. The push for technological progress is incredibly powerful, but this quote is just a stark reminder. In the end, no resource is more essential than water. For any ambition to be truly sustainable, it has to respect that simple reality.
Thank you for watching, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe the channel.